Many people get to eat 5-star quality food, wear costly branded clothes, and live in big villas. But did you know that there are many people out there living on the streets because they cannot afford the very basic of needs? This condition is known as poverty. Introduction. Poverty is a situation in which a section of people in a country are unable to meet their basic minimum needs such as food, clothing, housing, education, and health. According to official sources, there were 354.6 million poor people in India in 2009-2010. In terms of percentage, it is 29.8%, which means by large 30% of India's population is deprived of basic needs. Now, let us understand the meaning of poverty line. Meaning of poverty line. It refers to the cutoff point which divides the population as poor and non-poor. A person living in a rural area must consume minimum 2,400 calories per day, and a person living in urban must consume 2,100 calories. If a person consumes less than this, he is considered to be poor. There are two types of poverty. Absolute poverty, used in underdeveloped countries. It is poverty below the breadline. Those who suffer from absolute poverty have no guarantee that they will be able to meet the fundamental costs of living as a human being. Relative poverty, used in developed countries. It is expressed in terms of the living and working conditions of other members of the same society at the same time. It is a condition below the average level of the society in which they live. Let us now identify the poor in India. Rural poor consists of landless agricultural labor households, which contribute about 60% of all agricultural labor households. Agricultural labor households with very small holding, which constitute 40% of all agricultural households. Non-agricultural rural labor households without land holdings include village artisans who are losing their traditional employment, small land operators with cultivating holding of less than 1 hectare, besides tribals who constitute 18% of India's population are poor. Moving on, let us now discuss the measurement of poverty in India. Committees under the government classify the poor as 1. Chronic poor, who are always poor for a long duration. Example, casual workers. 2. Transient poor or occasionally poor, who regularly move in and out of poverty. Small and marginal farmers, seasonal workers come under this category. 3. Never poor, which includes non-poor, middle class and the rich. There are 4 alternative methods used to measure the incidence of poverty. They are head count ratio. It is the number of poor estimated as the proportion of people below the poverty line. Income gap ratio, IGR. It is obtained by dividing the total expenditure of the poor by number of people below the poverty line. Poverty gap index. It is the difference between the poverty line and the average income of all households living below the poverty line, expressed as percentage of poverty line. Squared poverty gap. It is the mean of the squared proportionate poverty gaps. It indicates the severity as well as sensitivity to inequality among the poor. Let us understand the main causes of poverty. The British destroyed cottage and small-scale industries of our country to promote their modern industries. They exploited natural resources to fulfill their vested interests. Income inequality is another reason, where a large section of population are forced to remain poor due to concentration of wealth and income in the hands of few. Low resource base of the poor. Large section of poor have very little land or no land at all. Small holdings possessed by them are not sufficient to meet their basic needs. Unemployment and underemployment leads to minimum purchasing capacity of the masses. Rapid growth of population, in turn, slow growth of per capita income and consumption leads to poverty. Growing price level, double-digit inflation in economy makes the commodities unreachable. Illiteracy, ignorance, backwardness, inadequacy of social structure and narrow outlook are some of the reasons leading to poverty. High indebtedness, low capital formation, lack of opportunities, underutilization of natural resources, poor purchasing power, etc. are some of the reasons for poverty. Finally, let's take a look at some of the programs undertaken by our government to help the poor. Government followed three-dimension approach to deal with poverty. They are growth-oriented approach. This approach aims at increasing GDP and per capita income. Income and employment generation approach. The income and employment of the poor could be increased through the creation of additional assets by work generation programs. Some of the programs introduced in the series are Swarna Jayanti Grama Swarojgar Yojana (SGSY), Swarna Jayanti Shahari Rozgar Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Rozgar Yojana (PMRY), National Food for Work Program (NFWP), Sampurna Gramin Rozgar Yojana (SGRY), Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Program (MGNREGP). Providing minimum basic needs to the people. This approach is to tackle poverty by providing minimum basic amenities to the people. Government spends money on public utility work such as education, health, water supply, sanitation to improve the standard of living of the people. Poverty Alleviation Program, a critical assessment. Various poverty alleviation programs initiated by the government were successful only to a limited extent. In spite of numerous programs, hunger, malnutrition, illiteracy, and lack of basic amenities continue in many parts of the country.